President candidate.
Hello, I am Beth Hardisty. I'm joined by USU Union Pres candidate Charlotte Clarke. Thank you very much for joining us here at URY, Charlotte. So you've got some big promises in your manifesto, especially around tackling the cost of living crisis. This is obviously a huge issue. Is this actually something that you would be able to change as SU president?
To be honest, I do think it is something that I could work towards changing. Obviously, you know, at the end of the day, this role is for a year. I'm not saying I'm going to change the face of the university in a year because that's unrealistic and students don't need to be lied to. But we've already seen throughout this entire pandemic, the current Union Pres has been working with all the Russell Group universities and Charlie Jeffrey and the NUS. They've managed to make significant headway. We got, safety nets deployed across our university. We were one of the first ones. If we work on this isn't just a York issue. This is happening all over the country. Students are being ripped off. If we work together and actually tackle it as a combined group of Russell Group unis and other unis, it definitely is something we can work towards. Obviously, throughout the pandemic as well, we were able to get emergency student support funding. I want to try and push to get some similar system in place because realistically, student finance just doesn't cover the majority of students' rents. I've worked my entire way through uni because my student finance does not cover my rent. I've also been a recipient of the York bursary, which has massively helped me. So we need to make sure that we can push for more students to get access to that funding and those systems that are already in place as well.
Another thing that we see year on year, aside from, cost of living, which of course has been a problem before it being as much of a national focus, we hear candidates mention, holding the university to account, transparency. It's all become a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
Outside of your campaign jargon, trying to get those votes, what meaning does this actually hold?
Realistically, if anyone has met me in person or come across me in any form of my university life, I have quite a loud voice and I'm not afraid to use it and I'm not afraid to stand up for what I believe in. A lot of people who, I've worked on committees in the past. I was treasurer for Goodrick throughout the entire pandemic. We had to fight to make sure that students were being looked after across that pandemic. And as a college system, it was really hard to do that because students were isolated in their flats that they'd only just met a couple of weeks or months ago. You weren't around like your close friends and family as a lot of other people were. So we fought for those students to be able to feel some form of comfort. So I'm definitely not afraid to stand up to authority and challenge things that aren't right. And I think I have such a passion for students and a passion for improving the student life that honestly, if I believe in something hard enough, I will push as hard as I can to try and get that for the students because I care. At the end of the day, I care so much and I want the students to feel like someone has their back, which hopefully I do.
I mean, this is something that's definitely not in the other manifestos, but you've made quite a key point on social media, at least, of highlighting that you could be one of the first women to hold this position in recent years. Of course, we've had Samara back in, at least my first year, I forget which year that is. Beyond just improving our representative statistics, what is the actual value of having a female SU? Is there any added value? And is this almost encouraging people to vote based on gender, which is obviously something that we'd frown upon generally?
No, absolutely not. I mean, at the end of the day, a couple of weeks ago, we did see there was a bit of controversy over the lack of diversity in a lot of the SAB candidates in previous years. We've had some amazing female candidates, we've had some amazing BAME candidates, but realistically, as a female, I understand quite a lot of challenges that women face, a lot more. Not saying that it's just women that face these problems, but women and non-binary people, they face a lot more challenges than your stereotypical male would, which is an issue. Like over the whole spiking epidemic, a lot of people do say it's just girls that face it. It's not. It's a wide thing. But a lot of girls are impacted by it and a lot of non-binary people are impacted by it. And we need to frame those in a different light because I'm fed up of these people just saying they're a representative for all the students, but at the end of the day, I won't sit here and say that I can represent every single issue that every single student is facing. I will not sit here and say that I will recognise every struggle that someone identifying as a BAME person will go through because I won't. But it's a step in the right direction for diversity and it's a step of changing the voice and changing the narrative, and we need to push for that more diversity and that better diversity in our elected representatives.
I mean, obviously, if you're a male listener, a male student, it's hard not maybe for some people to hear that this is something where people feel attacked sometimes by this narrative that there isn't this representative. You've obviously said there's limitation to your own representative function.
Yes.
What are you going to be able to do, if you're in this presidential role, to be able to kind of fill these gaps? Because that's obviously something we get a lot of buzzwords about, how, you know, you're going to listen to the voices, but if you know that you're going to be limited in your representative function, what actually materially are you going to do?
At the end of the day, like I said, I have a strong voice. I'm not afraid to use it. I am also a very active listener, and I want to listen to the students of this university. These students have such powerful voices. You know, we've got so many amazing outspoken students here that push for what they believe in, and we need to enable those voices. So through working with PTOs, liberation networks, colleges, we get to hear a massive representation of voices, but I feel like sometimes those are just pushed back slightly for other people's personal agendas. I actually want to listen to those voices, and I want to be that person that's pushing the university, pushing senior university members, and pushing councils to actually listen to them and address these issues and change them.
I mean, you've mentioned spiking and stuff like that, and of course, if anyone listening is sensitive to this issue, it's only going to be a couple of minutes, but you may wish to not listen. In your manifesto, you've spoken about how, you know, you want staff training. That's come from your experience in UC Bars. Training only goes so far, and we've just had a York Vision article come out talking about how this complaints procedure at the university has left a number of students feeling, you know, hard done by. Do you think that, you know, it doesn't seem quite enough adequate to address such a big problem? What would you actually be able to do beyond this training?
So obviously the training is important because, you know, once you're in that situation, it's easier to spot if something like that has happened, if you know what to look for. You know, quite often people are like, oh, it's just like you've had one too many. It's not. It's completely different. I mean, I personally was affected by this last term, and despite having the training and despite knowing how to avoid it and how to help if it does happen, I felt completely robbed of everything, and I almost blamed myself, which should never happen. But, you know, I didn't want to go and tell anyone about it because I was scared that people would judge me for it, and I was scared that would be my entire identity, which it's not. I have so many other attributes and so many other things about me. I didn't want this to take over. So yes, the training may not be enough to completely eradicate the problem, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, and we need to just keep pushing for that, and we need to work with the police, and we need to work with the council, and we need to work with, you know, the security staff and the nightclub staff, so that they are actually aware of what to do and how to support students. Because quite often we've seen, you know, in things like the tab and things like that, whenever people are saying, oh, this happened to me, but, you know, I was just ignored and they just said I'd had one too many. It's not that. It's completely different, and we need to actually get people to recognise the signs so they can know how to help whenever it does happen.
Another thing that I think just needs a bit of further clarification, you've mentioned about having a stronger presence on Hes East and King's Manor. What does this actually look like? Okay, so I've thought about this for quite a while. You know, I'm a Goodrick student. I lived on Goodrick, but I worked on West. I went to uni on West, and I've always wondered where this division between Hes West and Hes East has come from. And I feel like quite often Hes East and King's Manor as well are completely overlooked. Like, whenever I've been talking to people over the past couple of days, and even tonight, someone told me they didn't even know the King's Manor Library existed. So I think that sort of sums it up. We just need to let people know that those things are there, like especially in the pandemic, whenever, you know, library spaces were limited, King's Manor's there. People just don't realise that, and they don't recognise that, and it's so easy to go there and just be able to access facilities. And we need to have a stronger youth presence, especially during Freshers Week, because I know obviously a lot of the Freshers activities happen on West, like the Freshers Fair, for example. That was a massive thing. All student societies were there. And I'm going to have to cut you short, Charlotte. If I'm in the final 10 seconds, if you could only have one manifesto point, which one would it be?
I want change. I want change for these students, and I want to have their voices heard. No matter what your issue is, I want you to come and I want to speak to me should I get elected.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now on to the next UC President election interview.
Thanks very much, Beth, and good evening to Dylan Kennedy.